Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here, and in today's video I have to do something totally unprecedented here on the channel, something hitherto unbeknownst at Coach Toolshed Gaming altogether. We have to acknowledge that for once, Pete Hines, yes, that Pete Hines, the Senior Vice President of Global Marketing and Public Relations Communications at Bethesda Softworks, has actually told the truth about something, and for some strange reason no one really wanted to believe him, or there's some sort of weird collective amnesia going on many YouTube channels and in the mainstream gaming media, because everyone in the last couple of weeks has covered the story regarding the release date for Elder Scrolls 6, and I'm just sitting here saying, what's the story here? As I've seen so many outlets reacting with some form of weird mixture of shock, in some cases outrage even, and bewilderment. They just don't seem to comprehend the timeline here. They're just totally blown away that the game is going to be years out. And it's like, we've known this for a long time. We've known this for years, actually. And in some cases now, I've seen outlets that covered this exact story in 2018 that reported on quotes from Pete Hines directly regarding this situation. And now they're turning around in 2020, about a year and a half later, and acting like this is just some sort of shocking revelation, and I don't comprehend it. Now, people who followed my channel for a while know that I'm no defender of Bethesda, especially in their current state, and in particular, I'm no defender of Pete Hines. But in this case, this has been spelled out from Bethesda for a long time. Well before we even knew what Fallout 76 was, Bethesda was telling us that they had two major games coming from Bethesda Game Studios before the Elder Scrolls 6 was coming out. Now we know what they are, and we've known for a while. It's Fallout 76, which has been out, and that's a subject for another day. But the other game is Starfield, which we don't know anything about. And that is the state of things. And we've known this for a long time. And we also have quotes from Pete Hines, like I said, going back from 2018, which almost all of the people now covering this, is bewildering to me. Almost all of the outlets and almost all of the YouTube channels who are covering this story now and acting like they never saw this coming with the long release date were also closely following Pete Hines and what Bethesda was saying in October of 2018, because the imminent release of Fallout 76 was getting so much coverage. It was one of the most scrutinized releases that we've ever seen in gaming, and we all know what happened after it came out. But everyone was covering everything that Pete Hines was saying, every word that came out of his mouth between E3 2018 and the launch of Fallout 76. Everyone was making a video about it. Myself included. And everyone was writing articles about it. And he had a quote in Eurogamer back in October of 2018 where he said, quote, time frame wise, it would still be about as long as you'd expect when you look at Fallout 3 to Skyrim to Fallout 4 to Fallout 76. It's still going to be those periods of time. That hasn't changed. And one thing we can say about Bethesda is one thing they don't lie about is when they say something's going to be a long ways away, it's going to be a long ways away. They've never finished early on a project. They've never turned anything in on time. Everything they say, tack some extra time onto it. This generation has kind of been obscured, but Bethesda, going back into the 2000s, has always been known as a studio that takes longer than normal than most studios. It's always something that's happened with them. Back when game developers used to crank out games on a 1 or 2 year cycle, like just bang, 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 cranking out games, Bethesda always took a long time between their games. This generation, as we've seen more big AAA developers start to take a lot longer, Bethesda's sort of shuffled into the crowd, so their time frames don't seem that abnormal anymore. But if you forget, back in the 2000s, it was abnormal. Bethesda has always had that reputation for taking a long time. And like I said, they've never delivered on anything early. It's either on time or late. Always. So when they tell you that something's going to be between 3 to 4 years, which is what we're looking at here, remember, you got to throw Fallout New Vegas out of the mix because that's not a Bethesda Game Studios developed game. So look at Fallout 3, 2008. Then you go 3 years to Skyrim in 2011. Then it's 4 years until Fallout 4. And then another 3 to Fallout 76. And don't forget, the development time for Fallout 76 would have been sped up at least a bit because of the fact that there's so many reused assets, and basically Fallout 76 was built on the bones of Fallout 4, so that would have sped up the development time just a bit. Obviously, there's more work involved making it into a multiplayer game, but there was a lot of the underlying framework already in place, which would have undoubtedly meant that a game that they launched in 3 years, if it was a game that they were making from scratch, it probably would have been a 4 to 5 year window, just based on industry trends and Bethesda's own track record. Remember, at this point, we can go back, we're going back to 2008 now, and that's a pretty long time where you can take a look at their release schedule, and when the developer themselves is coming out and telling you, yes, use that time frame when you're judging the windows, and Bethesda has no track record of releasing things early, why anyone would have expected these games to be coming out anytime soon is beyond me. I'm talking about Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6. And this sort of commentary has been going on for almost 2 years at this point. It was a full year and a half ago where I did a video discussing games industry analyst Michael Pachter, who was proclaiming confidently that Elder Scrolls 6 was coming in late 2019 because of Fallout 76 not being the commercial success that Bethesda wanted, so that they were going to crank Elder Scrolls 6 out early, which was just mind-numbingly stupid at the time and obviously never came to fruition. And now we have a lot of different channels who've been saying for the last couple of years, believing that Starfield was coming in 2019, and when that didn't happen, that was coming in 2020, and I don't understand where this sentiment is coming from. The ironic thing about it is the paradox of some of the player base, where they're still on board with Bethesda and they believe everything that Pete Hines says, and they'll argue with you and say that, Pete Hines never lied about anything, Pete Hines never did this, he never did that. And then, for some reason, they do think that he's lying about the timetable for these games. They believe everything else that the man says. But then, when it comes to something he's saying that he doesn't have a track record of lying about, which is long timelines, they don't believe him. They think that they're going to spring these games on him, some sort of surprise release date. I see channels out there who pretend like they have inside sources at Bethesda, and they get everyone whipped into a frenzy thinking that Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6 are just going to have back-to-back launches in concurrent years, and it's just, that's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. We're talking about Bethesda Game Studios here. And as you know, Todd Howard has made it clear that we don't even have the technology to fulfill his dreams and ambitions. We know that, right? Anyway, I don't want this to come across in any way, shape, or form like I'm really defending Bethesda here, because as far as I'm concerned, their timeline is totally asinine. I'm going to discuss that in just a second. But the point here is, why do we have so many outlets acting like we haven't had this information for years already? Why was there so much shock? Why are people acting like this was some massive news story in the last couple weeks? Now, I know that Pete Hines went off on some people on Twitter, but it was never a news story that the Elder Scrolls 6 is still several years away. It's just not. So I don't understand anything that's going on. Now, the stuff with Bethesda, the timeline that they've chosen here, you have to take a look at the grand scale of things and understand that the timeline that they're going on, and I've pointed this out a long time ago here on the channel, but the timeline that we're looking at is we're going to go an entire generation, and plus we're going to go more than a decade in between mainline Elder Scrolls games. I don't know who at Bethesda Game Studios or Bethesda Softworks or at ZeniMax thought that that was a good idea. And I'm sure we never will know who thought that that was a good idea, but somehow that got approved, where one of the most successful IPs in all of gaming, you're going to go more than a decade. And at this point, people who want to say, well, Elder Scrolls Online bridged the gap. Okay, with the current timeline you're looking at, when you're looking at a potential 2024 to 2026 release window for the Elder Scrolls 6, you're still looking at a decade plus from the Elder Scrolls Online, which is just mind-blowingly stupid. Who in their right mind would put an IP of that much value on the bench for almost an entire, not just a console generation, but a real-life generation? Going 14 years in between games is... There's really not even a word to describe how stupid that is. Also, I mean, this has been said many times by many people, announcing a game in 2018 for a game that you know isn't coming at the earliest for 6 to 7 years is just setting yourself up for this sort of asinine response. Now, if Pete wants to get mad at people about it, I kind of understand it because it has been spelled out. But you can never underestimate the lowest common denominator. And you're going to, as long as you have a Twitter account, and Pete, what are you doing back on Twitter, first off? Stay off of Twitter. Stay off of Twitter. You're terrible on Twitter. Somehow you still have a job as the vice president of communications. I don't understand it. How you are in public relations with the temperament you have is beyond me. You kind of have the temperament that I do. And I would never be in public relations. How you have your job is another factor of this story that is mind-numbing. But the fact is, announcing a game, any game, not just for Bethesda, any developer, any publisher out there, you're announcing a game that you know is going to be minimum 5, 6, 7 years out. All you're doing is setting yourself up for stupid comments and stupid videos being made and all sorts of asinine commentary for the next 5 years on social media. And if you didn't know that going in, then again, I have to point out, Pete Hines just simply bad at his job. And at this point, if Pete Hines can't recognize that announcing that game, and we know the reasons why. They thought it was going to deflect from the hate for Fallout 76. Guess what? That didn't work. Announcing Starfield, that didn't work. So your little plan there, that did not work in any way, shape, or form. It worked up until a little bit. It worked with some of the player base up until Fallout 76 came out. And then you lost a good amount of those people as well. So the whole strategy has clearly backfired. And when Pete says that he has failed at managing expectations, he was saying that, I think, in sort of a sarcastic way, but he absolutely has failed. Absolutely has failed at managing the expectations of his player base. Because the people, especially the people that are still on board with Bethesda, they have been, a lot of them, jumping on board with these early timetables. I've been seeing people, they've been getting really excited about it. And some of them, I know here, not personally, but on YouTube, I know them. I've tried to tell them over the past couple of years that they're setting themselves up to be disappointed and they want to hope and dream anyway. And I get where you want to think that something is coming faster than it really is. But in this case, like I said, it's Bethesda. We know that they're not coming anytime soon. And when they spell it out for you directly, I think you have to believe it. And when they're reaffirming it, I don't understand the shock. I do not understand the people that are getting mad about it, because this is all stuff that we've known for years. And yeah, it's a real bad idea what they did. Announcing the game with the way they did with the trailer at E3. Just beyond stupid. Everything Pete Hines has been doing lately has been a failure for the last couple of years. I've discussed this in numerous videos. I don't know how he still has his job. And I have to think that in any other industry, he would not have his position anymore. Somehow the gaming industry just, you have your position for life apparently until you decide to resign or leave the studio. It's very rare that anyone with any power gets kicked out of a company. But somehow Pete Hines, he's back on Twitter after his long hiatus. I think he should go back on hiatus, probably permanently from Twitter, because every time he goes on there, he just gets into fights and makes himself kind of look like an idiot. But in this case, I do have to defend him slightly because he has spelled this out, and Bethesda has spelled this out, and we've known this timeline for years. Anyone acting shocked about this, I gotta think you're either faking it because you need some sort of content, or you just haven't been paying any attention at all. And like I said in the video, I can't believe that you haven't been paying attention at all when a lot of these outlets, where in the last couple of weeks they've been acting all surprised by this. You can go back to 2018 where they covered this exact quote that I gave you here in this video. But anyway, I think I've made my feelings known about that topic in my last video. That's it for me, Coach Toolshed. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel headed forward. And as always, keep it turned to 11.